They mistreated the German Shepherd, thinking he wouldn't react. But the outcome was unexpected. The cold night air wrapped around the abandoned lot like a heavy blanket, making every shadow seem deeper, every sound more ominous. Among the scattered debris and forgotten remnants of urban life, a German Shepherd huddled, his once proud frame now bearing the marks of neglect and mistreatment. His eyes, still sharp despite his condition, scanned the surroundings with practiced vigilance, not seeking escape, but anticipating the next threat. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching from. Stay with us. The dog's scarred body told a story of obedience turned to rebellion, of a spirit that refused to break completely despite everything it had endured. Once he had been a faithful servant, following commands without question, but something had changed on that fateful day when he chose to disobey. That single act of defiance had cost him everything he knew, leaving him discarded like a broken tool in this wasteland of forgotten things. The relative peace of the night was suddenly shattered by approaching voices, young and cruel, carrying with them the weight of senseless malice. The group of teenagers made no attempt to mask their presence, their laughter echoing off the concrete walls as they kicked stones along their path. They knew where to find him. They had been here before, treating his suffering like some twisted game. Armed with sticks and empty bottles, they began their usual routine of torment. Objects flew through the air, landing close enough to startle, but not quite hitting their target. The German Shepherd remained motionless, every muscle in his body tense, his heart pounding against his ribs. Experience had taught him that reaction only invited more pain, so he stayed still, enduring their taunts with practiced resignation. But this night was different. Through the darkness came an unexpected figure. A woman who had been walking home from her late shift at the local animal shelter. She could have continued walking, could have turned away like so many others before her. Instead, something made her stop. Perhaps it was the way the moonlight caught the dog's eyes, revealing a depth of intelligence and pain that struck her to her core. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, her voice cutting through the teenager's laughter with unexpected authority. The group faltered, caught off guard by this sudden intervention. They tried to dismiss her at first, but there was something in her stance, in the unwavering determination of her gaze, that made them think twice. With muttered curses and empty threats, they retreated into the darkness, leaving behind an uneasy silence. Alone with the dog, the woman crouched down, maintaining a careful distance. The German Shepherd didn't move, his eyes fixed on the ground, body braced for the violence that experience told him would surely come. But instead of pain, he felt something entirely different, a gentle touch on his matted fur, accompanied by a voice that carried no trace of cruelty. Sarah, as she would later introduce herself to her colleagues, worked at the local animal shelter. She had seen countless cases of abuse and neglect, but something about this dog's quiet dignity touched her deeply. She knew the road ahead would be challenging. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt. But as she slowly reached out to him again, she made a silent promise. This would be the last night he spent in the cold and dark. The German Shepherd remained rigid, uncertain. The woman's presence confused him, her gentleness at odds with everything he had come to expect from humans. His instincts, honed by harsh experience, told him to run, to hide, to protect himself from inevitable disappointment. But there was something else, something buried deep beneath layers of fear and pain that recognized a fundamental truth in her quiet patience. Time seemed to stand still in that moment, the usual sounds of the city fading into the background. The woman didn't move, didn't try to force any interaction. She simply waited, letting him process this unexpected turn of events at his own pace. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something in the dog's posture began to change. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But as the night grew colder and the shadows lengthened, the German Shepherd allowed himself to acknowledge a possibility he had long since abandoned. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was another path forward, one that didn't lead back to pain and loneliness. And with that tiny spark of hope, he took the first tentative step toward a future he couldn't yet imagine. The interior of Sarah's car felt like an alien world to the German Shepherd. The leather seats carried unfamiliar scents, and the soft blanket she had draped over him felt foreign against his matted fur. Every few seconds, his eyes darted around the vehicle, mapping possible escape routes, a habit born from years of survival. The drive seemed endless, each turn and stop making his muscles tense with anticipation. When the car finally came to a halt, new smells wafted through the air, different from the acrid stench of the abandoned lot he had called home. This place smelled of fresh grass, clean laundry, and something else he couldn't quite identify, perhaps safety, if such a thing had a scent. Still, he remained frozen in place, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this moment of peace to shatter like so many before it. Sarah's home was modest but warm, with a small garden in the back, where she ran a local flower shop. As she opened the car door, she moved with deliberate slowness, careful not to startle her new companion. The German Shepherd didn't bolt, though every instinct screamed at him to run. Instead, he followed her with hesitant steps, maintaining a careful distance. Inside the house, he positioned himself near the door, his body rigid with tension. It was a strategic spot, offering a quick escape if needed, while allowing him to observe everything around him. Sarah noticed his calculated positioning but didn't comment. Instead, she quietly set up a comfortable bed in the corner, placed water and food nearby, and went about her evening routine as if this was the most natural thing in the world. The first few days established a delicate dance between them. The German Shepherd refused to eat while being watched, waiting until the dead of night when the house was silent. He drank water in quick, nervous laps, his eyes never leaving his surroundings. Sleep came in short bursts, his body never fully relaxing, always ready to spring into action at the slightest sound. Sarah maintained her gentle patience. Each morning, she would speak to him in soft tones while replacing his water and food, never forcing interaction, never making sudden movements. She had learned through years of working with traumatized animals that trust couldn't be rushed. It had to be earned, one small moment at a time. During these early days, Sarah noticed subtle details about her new companion. Despite his fear, there was an intelligence in his eyes that spoke of complex understanding. When she spoke, his ears would twitch slightly, following her words. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she would catch him watching her with an intensity that suggested he was trying to solve a puzzle, trying to understand why this human was different from the others he had known. One particular morning brought the first small breakthrough. Sarah was working in her flower shop, which occupied the back portion of her house. The morning sun filtered through the greenhouse windows, creating patterns on the floor as she moved between the rows of plants, checking their needs, adjusting their positions for optimal growth. She had left the door to the main house open, more out of habit than expectation. As she worked, humming softly to herself, she became aware of a presence. The German Shepherd had ventured out of his corner and now stood in the doorway, observing her movements with cautious interest. It was the first time he had voluntarily left his designated safe spot. Sarah continued her work, pretending not to notice, but her heart swelled with hope. The dog watched as she tended to her flowers, his head tilting slightly as she spoke to the plants, an old habit she had never broken. There was something soothing about the scene. The gentle rustle of leaves, the warm sunlight, the quiet presence of this woman who had yet to show any sign of the cruelty he had come to expect from humans. Minutes stretched into an hour, and still he remained, gradually relaxing enough to sit, though his eyes never stopped their vigilant observation. This was more than just a physical movement. It was the first tentative step toward trust, a small crack in the walls he had built around himself. Sarah understood the significance of this moment, recognizing it as the delicate beginning of what could be a remarkable transformation. As the morning wore on, a customer entered the shop, causing the German Shepherd to retreat quickly to his safe corner in the house. But something had changed. A boundary had been crossed, a small risk had been taken, and the world hadn't come crashing down. It was a tiny victory, but in the journey of healing, sometimes the smallest steps carried the greatest weight. A week had passed since that first morning in the flower shop, and small changes were beginning to emerge in the German Shepherd's behavior. While still cautious, his movements had become less rigid, his eyes less haunted. Sarah had noticed how he would sometimes follow her shadow as she moved through the house, maintaining a safe distance, but showing an undeniable interest in her activities. The real test came when Sarah decided it was time to introduce him to the animal shelter where she volunteered. She had deliberated over this decision for days, wondering if it was too soon, if the exposure to new environments and other animals might undo the fragile progress they had made. But she also knew that isolation wouldn't help him heal completely. The morning of the visit, Sarah moved with extra care, speaking softly as she prepared for their journey. To her surprise, the German Shepherd didn't resist when she approached with a leash. He tensed, certainly, but allowed her to clip it to his collar with only a slight tremor running through his body. It was another small victory in their ongoing journey of trust. The shelter was a modest building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by large, fenced areas where the resident dogs could exercise. Sarah had chosen to visit during the quieter morning hours, when fewer volunteers were present and the atmosphere was calmer. As they approached, the German Shepherd's ears pricked forward, taking in the various sounds and scents of other animals. Inside, the shelter had a warmth that belied its institutional purpose. Colorful paintings decorated the walls, and the sound of soft music drifted through the corridors. Sarah led her companion slowly through the building, giving him time to process each new sensation. His body remained tense, but his eyes showed curiosity rather than pure fear. It was in the shelter's main socialization area that everything changed. As they entered the space, a medium-sized dog named Bella approached them. She was one of the shelter's longest residents, known for her gentle nature with newcomers. Unlike the German Shepherd, Bella's past hadn't left her bitter, just cautious and wise. Sarah watched as Bella approached, her body language completely non-threatening. She didn't barrel forward or make any sudden movements. Instead, she simply sat down a few feet away from the German Shepherd, her tail making slow, gentle sweeps across the floor. It was as if she understood exactly what this newcomer needed. The German Shepherd remained still, but Sarah noticed something different in his posture. There was tension, yes, but not the same kind of fear-driven rigidity she had grown accustomed to seeing. His eyes were fixed on Bella, studying her with an intensity that spoke of both wariness and curiosity. Minutes passed in this careful standoff, neither dog making any aggressive moves. Then, almost imperceptibly, the German Shepherd's tail moved. Just a slight twitch, but in this context, it felt monumental. Bella responded by lying down completely, making herself as non-threatening as possible while maintaining her gentle, accepting presence. Sarah held her breath as she watched this silent communication unfold. She had seen many dogs interact at the shelter, but there was something different about this exchange. It was as if Bella instinctively understood what the German Shepherd needed. Not pressure, not demands, just quiet acceptance and space to find his own way. As the morning progressed, other shelter dogs came and went through the socialization area, but Bella remained constant, a calm presence that seemed to anchor the German Shepherd in this new environment. Though he never fully relaxed, Sarah noticed how his attention would periodically return to Bella, as if checking to see if she was still there, still maintaining that peaceful energy. The visit marked a turning point in their journey. It showed Sarah that her companion wasn't completely closed off to connections. He just needed them to form on his own terms, at his own pace. As they prepared to leave, she noticed how the German shepherd's gaze lingered on Bella, something new flickering in his eyes. It wasn't quite friendship yet, but it was the recognition of possibility, the first acknowledgement that not every interaction had to end in pain. The days following that first shelter visit established a new routine. Sarah would bring the German shepherd to the shelter every morning before opening her flower shop, allowing him to spend time in the socialization area with Bella. Each visit brought subtle changes in his demeanor, like winter ice slowly thawing under the persistent warmth of spring sunshine. Bella's presence had become a constant source of calm for the German shepherd. She never pushed for interaction, never invaded his space, but remained a steady, accepting presence. Sometimes they would sit in companionable silence, several feet apart, watching the world go by through the shelter windows. Other times Bella would play with toys nearby, her relaxed enjoyment serving as a gentle invitation that was never forced. Back at home, Sarah noticed how these shelter visits were affecting her companion's behavior. His movements became more fluid, less guarded. When she worked in the flower shop, he would now regularly emerge from his corner to watch her arrange bouquets, his eyes following her hands as she transformed simple flowers into works of art. Sometimes he would even lay down in a patch of sunlight near the greenhouse windows, though always maintaining a clear path to the exit. One particularly significant moment came during their morning routine. Sarah had been preparing their breakfast, coffee for her, kibble for him, when she accidentally dropped a metal bowl. In the past, such sudden noises would send the German shepherd retreating to his corner, but this time, though he startled, he held his ground. His body tensed, certainly, but his eyes sought out Sarah's face first, as if checking to ensure everything was all right before deciding how to react. That same morning, something else changed. As Sarah placed his food bowl down, instead of waiting for her to leave the room as he usually did, the German shepherd approached while she was still present. His movements were cautious, his muscles ready to retreat at the slightest provocation, but he chose to eat with her there. Sarah continued her morning routine, pretending not to notice this monumental shift, but her heart swelled with pride at this display of growing trust. The shelter visits continued to provide new opportunities for growth. Other dogs would sometimes join Bella and the German shepherd in the socialization area, each interaction teaching him something new about trust and companionship. There was Max, a bouncy young retriever whose enthusiasm was initially overwhelming but gradually became less threatening. Then there was Luna, an elderly husky who shared the German shepherd's preference for quiet observation. Bella remained special, though. She seemed to understand instinctively when to maintain distance and when to move slightly closer. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the shelter windows, she brought her favorite toy, a well-worn rope, and placed it halfway between them. It wasn't a demand for play, just an offer, an invitation that could be accepted or declined without judgment. The German shepherd watched the rope for several long moments, his eyes moving between it and Bella. Sarah, observing from her usual spot, held her breath. Slowly, with movements that suggested he was surprising even himself, he stretched forward and touched the rope with his nose. Bella's tail wagged gently, but she made no move to snatch the toy or force an interaction. Instead, she waited, letting him set the pace of this new development. That single touch of the nose to the rope might have seemed insignificant to an outside observer, but to Sarah, it represented something profound. It was a conscious choice to engage, to reach out, to take a risk, despite past experiences that had taught him that reaching out only led to pain. The moment hung in the air, fragile as a soap bubble, filled with possibility. As the morning progressed, the German Shepherd remained near the rope, occasionally glancing at it or touching it with his nose. Bella maintained her patient presence, her calm energy creating a safe space for exploration. Though no actual play occurred that day, something fundamental had shifted. A barrier had been broken, not with force or demand, but through patience, understanding, and the gentle persistence of a friend who asked for nothing but offered everything. The transformation in the German Shepherd's behavior, though gradual, was becoming more noticeable with each passing day. His eyes, once constantly scanning for threats, now held moments of peaceful observation. During their morning visits to the shelter, he had begun to show subtle signs of anticipation, his ears perking up as they approached the familiar building where Bella waited. Sarah's flower shop had become another source of positive change. The German Shepherd had claimed a spot near the large window where shafts of sunlight warmed the wooden floor. From there, he could watch Sarah work while keeping an eye on both the entrance and the back door. It was a strategic position, but one that allowed him to participate in the daily life of the shop rather than hiding away. Customers had begun to notice him, commenting on his regal bearing despite his still healing appearance. Sarah would explain that he was a special case, careful not to reveal too much of his past, but emphasizing his gentle nature. The German Shepherd would observe these interactions from his spot, his body tense but no longer trembling at the presence of strangers. One morning, as Sarah arranged a particularly complex wedding bouquet, she noticed something different about her companion's behavior. Instead of maintaining his usual distance, he had moved closer to her workbench, his eyes following her hands as she wove together roses and lilies. There was something almost peaceful in his expression, a momentary forgetting of past traumas as he watched the creation of something beautiful. The shelter visits had evolved as well. The rope toy that Bella had introduced became a regular fixture in their interactions. Though the German Shepherd still didn't engage in actual play, he would now deliberately position himself near it, sometimes nudging it with his nose, while Bella watched with patient encouragement. These small gestures spoke volumes about his growing confidence. However, beneath this progress, shadows of his past still lingered. Certain sounds would still make him freeze: the crash of something falling, raised voices from the street, the bang of a car backfiring. In these moments, his old instincts would surface, muscles tensing for flight or fight. But there was a difference now. Instead of immediately retreating, he would look to Sarah or Bella as if seeking confirmation that the world was still safe. One particularly meaningful moment came during a quiet afternoon at the shop. A delivery truck had backfired outside, causing a startling boom that echoed through the street. The German Shepherd's initial response was to jump to his feet, body rigid with tension. But instead of hiding in his corner, he moved closer to Sarah, who had remained calm at her workbench. It was the first time he had actively sought proximity for comfort. Sarah continued working, pretending not to notice this significant shift, but her heart raced with the understanding of what this meant. He was beginning to see her as a source of safety rather than potential threat. The trust they had been building, day by day, moment by moment, was starting to overcome the deeply ingrained fears of his past. That evening, as they prepared to leave the shop, something unprecedented happened. As Sarah gathered her things, the German Shepherd brought her the leash, a simple action that spoke volumes about his developing agency and trust. It wasn't just that he was accepting the routine anymore, he was actively participating in it. At the shelter the next morning, Bella seemed to sense the change in him. Her approach was slightly more direct, though still respectful of his boundaries. She brought the rope toy closer than usual, her tail wagging with gentle enthusiasm. The German Shepherd watched her with new interest, his own tail showing the slightest movement, not quite a wag, but more than the usual stillness. These changes, though significant to those who knew him, might have seemed small to an outside observer. But Sarah understood that each tiny step forward represented a battle won against fear. Each moment of trust, a victory over past trauma. The German Shepherd was learning, slowly but surely, that not every hand would strike, not every voice would yell, not every human would betray. The weather had turned unseasonably warm for that time of year, prompting Sarah to organize an outdoor socialization session at the shelter. The fenced area behind the building had been set up with various toys and resting spots, creating a safe space for the dogs to interact more freely. The German Shepherd, though still cautious, had shown increasing comfort with these controlled outdoor sessions. Bella, as usual, stayed close to him, her presence acting as a buffer between him and the more energetic dogs. Their routine had evolved to include brief moments of shared interest in toys, though actual play remained a distant goal. Today, however, felt different. Perhaps it was the gentle spring breeze or the warmth of the sun, but there was a subtle shift in the German Shepherd's demeanor. Sarah watched from her usual spot near the fence as her companion surveyed the area with alert but not fearful eyes. His posture, while still vigilant, had lost some of its rigid tension. The other shelter dogs moved around them in their usual patterns, Max bouncing after his ball, Luna sunbathing in a quiet corner, and several newer additions exploring the space with varying degrees of enthusiasm. The morning progressed peacefully until an unexpected disruption shattered the calm. A delivery truck passing by the shelter backfired loudly, the sound echoing off the surrounding buildings like a thunderclap. The reaction among the dogs was immediate. Several barked in alarm, others froze in place, and a few rushed toward the fence in excitement. Bella, usually so composed, startled badly at the sound. Perhaps it triggered some memory from her own past, or maybe it was simply the suddenness of the noise, but something about it sent her into a panic. Before anyone could react, she bolted, her fear driving her toward a small gap in the fence that maintenance had scheduled to repair later that day. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat as she saw Bella squeeze through the gap. The street beyond was busy with morning traffic, and Bella was running straight toward it, blind to everything except her need to escape. Sarah started running, calling Bella's name, but the frightened dog was beyond hearing, her panic carrying her closer to the dangerous road. The next few moments seemed to unfold in slow motion. The German Shepherd, who had been watching everything with intense focus, suddenly sprang into action. Without hesitation, he launched himself toward the same gap in the fence, his larger size forcing him to push through with determined strength. His powerful legs carried him after Bella with unexpected speed. Sarah watched in horror as Bella reached the edge of the busy street, her paws skidding on the pavement as she finally froze, seemingly paralyzed by the sight of oncoming traffic. A car was approaching, its driver unaware of the drama unfolding ahead. The German Shepherd, however, had not slowed his pursuit. Just as the car's tires screeched in belated recognition of danger, the German Shepherd reached Bella. With precision that spoke of his training, he used his body to push her away from the street, guiding her firmly but carefully back toward the safety of the sidewalk. His actions were decisive, controlled, and completely focused on protecting his friend. The car passed harmlessly by, but the German Shepherd maintained his protective stance, positioning himself between Bella and the street. His posture was no longer that of a traumatized victim, but of a guardian, a protector. For the first time since Sarah had known him, he let out a deep, warning bark at the passing vehicle, as if challenging anything that might threaten his companion. Sarah finally reached them, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and relief. Bella was shaking but unharmed, pressing close to the German Shepherd as if seeking comfort from her protector. The transformation in him was remarkable. His eyes were clear and focused, his body language confident and purposeful. In this moment of crisis, all his fear had given way to something stronger, the instinct to protect. The aftermath of the near accident brought a profound change in the dynamics at the shelter. The German Shepherd's heroic action had revealed a side of him that had been buried beneath layers of trauma and fear. As Sarah led both dogs back to the shelter, she noticed how he walked with a new purpose, his head held higher, his steps more assured. Bella's reaction to her protector was equally telling. Though still shaken from her ordeal, she stayed close to him, her body language expressing complete trust. The connection between them had deepened in those few crucial moments, transforming from a cautious friendship into something more profound. It was as if the German Shepherd's decisive action had awakened something dormant within him, a reminder of his true nature. Back inside the shelter, the other volunteers gathered around, having witnessed the dramatic scene from various vantage points. Their presence would have normally caused the German Shepherd to retreat, but today was different. He remained steady, accepting their proximity with newfound confidence while maintaining his protective stance near Bella. Sarah observed this transformation with wonder and a deep sense of pride. The dog who had once hidden from the world had found something worth protecting, something that mattered more than his own fear. This wasn't just about saving Bella from physical harm. It was about choosing to engage with life again, to take action, instead of remaining paralyzed by past trauma. The day's events had exhausted both dogs, and Sarah decided to bring the German Shepherd home earlier than usual. As they walked through her garden toward the house, she noticed how he paused to scan the area, not with his usual fearful vigilance, but with the alert awareness of a guardian. His posture remained relaxed but ready, a balance he seemed to have rediscovered within himself. Inside the flower shop, he settled into his usual spot by the window, but something was different. Instead of positioning himself for a quick escape, he chose an angle that gave him a clear view of both the entrance and Sarah's workstation. His eyes, though still watchful, held a new expression, one of purpose rather than fear. That evening, as Sarah prepared their dinner, she was surprised to hear a soft whine from her companion. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen, looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't fear or hesitation that made him vocalize. It was communication. He was choosing to express himself, to make his presence known rather than remain silent and invisible. Sarah knelt down slowly, maintaining eye contact. The German Shepherd approached her with deliberate steps, and for the first time since she had rescued him, he initiated physical contact. His nose touched her hand briefly, a gesture so simple yet so profound that Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. This wasn't the fearful submission he had shown in the past. This was a conscious choice to connect. The next morning, their arrival at the shelter was met with excitement. Bella was waiting in the socialization area, her tail wagging as soon as she saw them. The German Shepherd's response was immediate. His own tail lifted slightly, and his steps quickened as they approached. The bond between them had grown stronger through their shared experience. As they settled into their usual routine, Sarah noticed subtle but significant changes in how the German Shepherd carried himself. When other dogs approached, he no longer tensed for flight. Instead, he assessed each situation with calm awareness, choosing how to respond rather than reacting from fear. He had found his inner strength, and with it, a new way of engaging with the world. The rope toy that had once been a source of hesitation now became a bridge between him and Bella. For the first time, he picked it up himself, holding it tentatively while looking at his friend. Bella's response was perfectly matched, neither too excited nor too hesitant. She approached slowly, her body language open and inviting, and together they began a gentle game of tug-of-war, their movements synchronized in a dance of newfound trust and joy. The days following the incident at the shelter brought a series of small but significant changes in the German Shepherd's behavior. His morning routine had shifted. Instead of waiting to be led, he now stood ready by the door, eager to start their daily journey to the shelter. The transformation wasn't just in his actions, it was reflected in his entire demeanor, from the way he held his head to the steady confidence in his gaze. At the flower shop, customers began to notice the change. The once nervous dog now watched their interactions with quiet interest rather than wary suspicion. Some of the regular customers even commented on the difference, noting how he seemed more present, more engaged with his surroundings. Sarah would smile, knowing that each small interaction represented a victory over his past trauma. One particularly meaningful moment came during a busy morning at the shop. A young girl, no more than 7, had wandered in with her mother. In the past, children's unpredictable movements had made the German Shepherd especially nervous, causing him to retreat to his safe corner. But this time, when the girl pointed at him with excitement, he remained calm, his eyes gentle as he watched her from his spot by the window. The mother, noticing his composed demeanor, asked Sarah if her daughter could approach him. Sarah hesitated, still protective of her companion's boundaries, but something in his relaxed posture made her consider it. She explained to the girl how to move slowly and let him make the choice to interact or not. To everyone's surprise, the German Shepherd slowly stood and took a few steps forward, his tail held neutral but not fearful. The girl, following Sarah's instructions perfectly, stood still and let him approach at his own pace. When he finally got close enough to sniff her extended hand, his tail gave a small, tentative wag. It was a moment of pure magic, the kind that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. This dog, who had once flinched at the slightest human movement, was choosing to trust again. At the shelter, his relationship with Bella continued to deepen. Their play sessions had become more frequent and natural, though still gentle and controlled. Other dogs had begun to pick up on his calmer energy, and the socialization area had become a more harmonious space under his steady presence. Even Max, the bouncy retriever, had learned to moderate his enthusiasm around the German Shepherd, as if respecting the quiet strength he projected. One morning, Sarah arrived at the shelter to find a new dog had been brought in overnight. A nervous young collie who reminded her of how the German Shepherd had been in those early days. The shelter staff were having trouble getting close enough to check the dog for injuries, its fear making it snap at anyone who approached. Sarah watched as her companion observed the situation from his usual spot, his ears forward with interest. What happened next amazed everyone present. The German Shepherd slowly stood and walked toward the frightened collie's kennel, his body language calm and non-threatening. He sat down at a respectful distance, simply existing in the same space without demanding anything. The collie's frantic barking gradually subsided as it watched this peaceful presence, something in the German Shepherd's energy seeming to communicate understanding. Bella, sensing what was happening, joined him, maintaining the same calm energy. Together, they created a peaceful bubble that allowed the frightened newcomer to slowly relax. The shelter staff watched in wonder as the collie's defensive posture began to ease, its eyes moving between the two dogs with growing curiosity rather than fear. Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. The German Shepherd wasn't just recovering from his own trauma, he was using his experience to help another lost soul find its way back to trust. His journey had come full circle, transforming him from a victim into a healer, from someone who needed saving into someone who could save others. Later that evening, as they walked home through the quiet streets, Sarah noticed how the German Shepherd moved with purpose, his steps sure and steady. He no longer scanned the shadows for threats, but instead seemed to embrace the peace of the moment. When they passed the empty lot where she had first found him, he glanced at it briefly before continuing forward, as if acknowledging but no longer haunted by his past. The transformation of the German Shepherd had become the talk of the shelter. Volunteers who had witnessed his journey from a fearful, traumatized animal to a confident, nurturing presence, couldn't help but share his story with visitors. His ability to connect with other frightened dogs had made him an unofficial therapy dog, helping newcomers adjust to shelter life with his calm, understanding presence. The young collie, who had arrived in such distress, had made remarkable progress under the German Shepherd's gentle influence. Sarah often found them in the socialization area together, with Bella completing their small group. The three dogs had formed a unique bond, each contributing to the healing of the others in their own way. One morning, as Sarah worked in her flower shop, she noticed something that made her pause mid-arrangement. The German Shepherd, instead of maintaining his usual watchful position, was sound asleep in his sunny spot by the window. It wasn't the fact that he was sleeping that surprised her, it was how he was sleeping. His body was completely relaxed, his guard totally down, trusting enough in his environment to allow himself to be truly vulnerable. The shop's bell chimed as a customer entered, and Sarah watched as her companion lifted his head, alert but not alarmed. His eyes tracked the movement of the elderly woman who had come to collect her weekly flower arrangement, but there was no tension in his body. When the customer commented on his beautiful coat, now healthy and gleaming from proper care, he actually stood and walked closer, accepting her presence with dignified grace. At the shelter, his influence continued to grow. The staff had begun timing the introduction of new dogs to coincide with his visits, having noticed how his presence could calm even the most agitated newcomers. His method was always the same: patient, non-threatening, and completely accepting of whatever response he received. It was as if he remembered his own journey and knew exactly what these frightened souls needed. Bella had become his constant partner in these gentle interventions. Together, they created a safe space for other dogs to find their courage. Sarah watched as they worked their magic with a recently rescued terrier who had spent its first days hiding in the corner of its kennel. The German Shepherd's approach was careful but confident, showing the smaller dog that there was nothing to fear. One particularly meaningful moment came during a rainy afternoon at the shelter. A thunderstorm had rolled in unexpectedly, causing anxiety among many of the dogs. In the past, such loud noises would have triggered the German Shepherd's own trauma responses. Instead, he remained calm, his steady presence helping to anchor the more nervous dogs. Even when a particularly loud crack of thunder shook the building, he merely lifted his head, assessed the situation, and returned to his peaceful observation. Sarah noticed how other dogs would look to him during these moments of stress, taking cues from his relaxed demeanor. His transformation had created a ripple effect throughout the shelter, changing not just his own life, but the lives of countless other animals. The staff had even begun documenting his methods, learning from his intuitive understanding of how to approach and calm frightened dogs. The flower shop, too, had been transformed by his presence. Regular customers now came not just for Sarah's beautiful arrangements, but also to spend a moment in the peaceful atmosphere that the German Shepherd helped create. Children would press their faces against the shop window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the gentle giant who had become something of a neighborhood celebrity. One morning, as Sarah prepared for their daily trip to the shelter, she found him waiting by the door with the leash in his mouth, a behavior that had become his new routine. But today, there was something different in his eyes as he looked at her. It wasn't just trust or affection, it was a deep understanding, a recognition of their shared journey. He had moved beyond merely healing from his past. He had found his purpose in helping others do the same. The shelter had organized a special adoption event, transforming its usual quiet atmosphere into a bustling space of activity and hope. Volunteers had decorated the main area with colorful banners and set up information booths about responsible pet ownership. The German Shepherd, who once would have retreated from such commotion, now moved through the space with calm confidence, Bella at his side. Sarah watched with pride as her companion helped maintain order among the other dogs, his presence acting as a stabilizing force amid the excitement. Even with the increased number of visitors, he remained composed, his eyes alert but peaceful. The transformation from the frightened dog she had found in that abandoned lot to this noble creature before her seemed almost miraculous. The morning progressed smoothly until a familiar sound cut through the cheerful atmosphere. Voices that carried the weight of cruelty, voices that the German Shepherd recognized from his past. A group of teenagers had wandered into the shelter, the same ones who had tormented him in the abandoned lot. They hadn't come for adoption. Their sneering faces and mocking tones made their intentions clear. At first, they didn't notice him, too busy making disparaging comments about the other dogs. Sarah felt her heart race as she saw recognition dawn in their eyes when they finally spotted the German Shepherd. She expected him to retreat, to show signs of his old fear, but something entirely different happened. Instead of cowering or hiding, the German Shepherd stood his ground. His posture remained calm but alert, his eyes steady as he watched them. There was no fear in his stance, no trembling or signs of past trauma. He had found something stronger than fear. He had found his own worth, his own strength. Bella, sensing the tension, moved closer to him, her presence supportive but not protective. The other shelter dogs, who had learned to look to him for guidance, remained surprisingly calm, despite the negative energy the teenagers brought with them. It was as if his confidence created a shield that protected not just himself, but all those around him. The teenagers, thrown off by this unexpected display of dignity, began to shift uncomfortably. They had expected to find the same frightened creature they had tormented, but instead faced a proud, composed animal who showed no signs of intimidation. Their power over him had vanished, dissolved by his newfound strength. Sarah stepped forward, ready to intervene if necessary, but the German Shepherd glanced at her with an expression that seemed to say he could handle this. He remained in his spot, neither advancing nor retreating, his calm presence a stark contrast to their aggressive energy. It was a silent confrontation, but one that spoke volumes about the power of transformation. One of the teenagers made a sudden movement, perhaps hoping to startle him, but the German Shepherd didn't flinch. Instead, he took one deliberate step forward, not in aggression but in quiet authority. The message was clear. This was his space now, a place of healing and hope, and their attempts to bring chaos would not be tolerated. The group's bravado crumbled in the face of such quiet strength. They muttered among themselves, trying to save face, but their power had been broken. As they turned to leave, the German Shepherd maintained his dignified stance, watching them go with neither fear nor anger, just a calm awareness that spoke of how far he had come. After they left, the shelter seemed to release a collective breath. The other dogs, who'd been watching the scene unfold, began to relax again. Bella nuzzled the German Shepherd gently, and he responded with a soft wag of his tail. The incident had proven something important. His healing wasn't just about feeling safe in good moments, but about maintaining his peace even when faced with reminders of his past. The aftermath of the confrontation with the teenagers had brought an unexpected depth to the German Shepherd's influence at the shelter. Volunteers who had witnessed his calm strength spread the story, and it became a symbol of hope for everyone working with traumatized animals. His journey from victim to protector had proved that even the deepest wounds could heal with time, patience, and love. One particularly busy morning at the shelter, Sarah noticed something different about her companion's behavior. He seemed more alert than usual, his attention focused on the shelter's aging infrastructure. His eyes kept returning to a specific section of the fence where maintenance had been making repairs. Though the workers had declared it fixed, the German Shepherd's instincts suggested otherwise. The day had started normally enough, The usual morning routines, the familiar faces of volunteers and staff, the comfortable presence of Bella and the other dogs in the socialization area. But there was an unusual tension in the air, perhaps due to the approaching storm system that had been forecast. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Sarah was helping a new volunteer learn the feeding routines when the first drops of rain began to fall. The sudden change in weather sent a ripple of excitement through the shelter dogs, with many becoming more active and vocal. The German Shepherd, however, maintained his calm presence, moving closer to the nervous ones, his steady energy helping to keep them grounded. Bella was working her own magic with a group of younger dogs, showing them by example how to remain calm despite the increasing storm. The bond between her and the German Shepherd had grown into something remarkable. They worked together seamlessly, each understanding their role in maintaining the shelter's delicate emotional balance. The storm intensified quickly, bringing with it powerful gusts of wind that rattled the shelter's windows. Most of the dogs were inside now, but a few remained in the covered portion of the outdoor area, including a recently arrived group of puppies who were still learning the shelter's routines. The German Shepherd's attention kept returning to them, his body language suggesting growing concern. Suddenly, a particularly violent gust of wind tore through the shelter yard. The section of fence that had worried the German Shepherd began to buckle under the pressure. In that same moment, a deafening crack of thunder shook the building, causing panic among the puppies. They scattered in fear, running in different directions, some heading straight for the weakening fence. The German Shepherd's reaction was immediate. Without hesitation, he moved toward the group of frightened puppies, his movements purposeful and calm despite the chaos around him. Bella, understanding his intention, quickly joined him, helping to guide the scared young dogs away from the dangerous area. The wind continued to howl, and the compromised section of fence groaned ominously. Sarah and the other volunteers rushed to help, but they were slowed by the driving rain and the need to secure other areas of the shelter. The German Shepherd, however, remained focused on his self-appointed task, positioning himself between the puppies and the fence. Using the same gentle but firm energy he had developed through his work with frightened newcomers, he began herding the puppies towards safety. His presence was both commanding and reassuring, giving the young dogs something to focus on besides their fear. Bella worked alongside him, the two of them creating a protective barrier that guided the puppies back toward the shelter building. One particularly frightened puppy had pressed itself against the wobbling fence, too scared to move. The German Shepherd approached carefully, his body language conveying a confidence that seemed to say, "Trust me, I know what fear feels like, but I also know the way to safety." The puppy looked up at him, its small body trembling, but something in the larger dog's calm presence reached through its panic. The storm raged on, but within its chaos, a remarkable scene was unfolding. The German Shepherd stood steadfast beside the frightened puppy, his presence creating a bubble of calm in the midst of the tempest. With gentle movements, he nudged the small dog away from the threatening fence, his body positioned to shield it from both the wind and the rain. Bella, understanding the urgency of the situation, had successfully guided the other puppies to safety and now returned to assist her friend. Together, they created a protective corridor through which the last puppy could escape the danger. The fence continued to groan under the assault of the wind, its compromised section threatening to give way at any moment. Sarah watched from the shelter doorway, her heart swelling with pride and emotion. The German Shepherd she had rescued from that abandoned lot had become something extraordinary, not just a survivor, but a protector, a guide, a beacon of hope for others who knew fear and pain. His transformation was complete, yet it had led him right back to where his journey began, choosing to help those who needed protection. As the last puppy finally reached safety, escorted by both the German Shepherd and Bella, The compromised section of fence finally succumbed to the storm's fury. The timing of the rescue couldn't have been more perfect, a testament to the German Shepherd's intuition and courage. His actions had prevented what could have been a tragic situation, turning it instead into a moment of triumph. Inside the shelter, the rescued puppies quickly calmed down, drawing strength from the steady presence of their protectors. The German Shepherd moved among them with gentle authority, checking each one as if to ensure they were truly safe. His behavior reminded Sarah of how far he had come, from a dog who could barely trust humans to one who now took responsibility for the well-being of others. The storm eventually passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape and an equally transformed atmosphere within the shelter. The story of the German Shepherd's heroic actions spread quickly among the volunteers and staff, though he remained as humble and focused as ever, continuing his daily rounds with Bella at his side. That evening, as Sarah prepared to close the flower shop, she found her companion in his usual spot by the window. But tonight, there was something different in his posture. A quiet pride, a sense of purpose, fulfilled. When he looked at her, his eyes held a warmth that spoke of complete trust and contentment. He had found his place in the world, not despite his past, but because of how he had chosen to rise above it. The front bell chimed as a final customer entered. A young girl and her mother, regulars who often came to watch the German Shepherd. The girl had been following his story since the early days, watching his transformation with wide-eyed wonder. Today, she carried a small, handmade card with a drawing of a dog wearing a superhero cape. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears as the girl carefully placed the card near the German Shepherd. He responded by gently wagging his tail and moving closer to accept her shy pat on his head, an interaction that would have been unthinkable months ago. The girl's mother explained that his story had helped her daughter overcome her own fears, showing her that courage wasn't about never being scared, but about choosing to be kind and brave despite being scared. Later that night, as Sarah and her companion walked home under the clearing sky, she reflected on their journey together. The German Shepherd walked beside her with confident steps, occasionally glancing up at her with eyes that no longer held shadows of the past. He had become more than just a rescue success story. He was a testament to the transformative power of love, patience, and the choice to rise above pain to help others. At home, he settled into his bed, no longer positioned for a quick escape, but rather in a spot where he could watch over the whole room. Bella, who often stayed with them now, curled up nearby, their companionable silence speaking volumes about the bonds they had formed. The German Shepherd's journey had come full circle, from a victim of cruelty to a beacon of hope for others. In choosing to protect rather than fear, to trust rather than hide, he had not only healed himself, but had become a healer for others. Dear listeners, we hope the story of this remarkable German Shepherd has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. His journey from fear to courage, from pain to healing, reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope and transformation are possible. If this story has moved you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this story resonated with you. For more inspiring tales of healing and hope, click on the playlist to your left. Together, let's continue to spread stories that remind us of the power of compassion and the strength of the spirit. See you in our next video.